Catherine, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to speak. So like David mentioned, my name is Catharine Montgomery. I'm the founder and CEO of an agency called Better Together. We're a full service communications agency focused on social impact. So we work with for-profit and non-for-profit companies as long as what we're doing makes the world a better place. And I launched last January 2023. And we're backed by a venture capital firm, which is a little strange since it's a service-based agency and you don't really need VC funding, but they actually only invest in public relations agencies. And they did think I was crazy to want to start an agency solely focused on social impact. One of the investors lives in Germany, and he was like, that makes no sense. How could you do that and make any money? But I told him that the US is a lot different than Germany. We actually talk about racism and sexism and things like that instead of hiding behind it, like the Germans do. Sorry if you're German. When I started the agency, I was again focused on social impact. And as I've started using generative AI a while ago, back when it was launched with ChatGPT, and before that, I started finding biases in the work that and was being generated. And I thought it was just me. I was like, am I going crazy? Because nobody was really talking about it. And then I kept finding situations where there were more biases in the inputs I was putting in. Like I put in a radio script and said, make this for a Black audience. And it came back with, yo, fam, we're going to get some grub. And I was like, I don't know
Very
anybody
much like
talking.
what was it like American Fiction?
Yeah, it really was. I was like, is this a movie? And then like I recently put in generate a picture of Maya Angelou and it was, a white old woman, which was very interesting. So we put out a study earlier this year on biases in generative AI. I think it's one of the first, if not the first, that an agency has done. And so want to give some background on our findings, also hear from you all on what you think, if you've witnessed any biases, if you think it's a concern that should be addressed. So I'm going to share some slides and hopefully I can get this right. Um, okay, great. Awesome. So the study was called Better Together Insights Report, and I think I forgot, but that's the name of the agency, Better Together, and Navigating Biases in Generative AI. And I want to start by just saying like why I did this again in a little bit more detail. So I was born in Alabama. Well, I was born in New Orleans and grew up throughout Alabama. And it's a place where you don't really talk about racism face to face, but you just talk, you're nice to each other. And then behind your back, you kind of talk about it. And I was really naive growing up thinking that racism wasn't a thing. I also moved to Boston a few years ago after being in DC and lived in a part of town where Black people didn't live. If you know Back Bay and know Boston area, any, so I felt really uncomfortable there. Eventually moved back to DC a couple years ago. And the previous agency I was at, which was a progressive agency, a woman was being racist toward me as well. So it's just all these things started culminating and I started realizing what was actually happening to me. So it made me much more aware of biases and different things that were in the world. I also was in the airport the day after Christmas, 2023. Unfortunately, don't ever fly the day after Christmas and go to the Atlanta airport. I was waiting in an extremely long line, and I had been wanting to read this McKinsey study on the racial wealth gap and how generative AI can either close that or exacerbate it. And if we don't close it, $43 billion a year will increase the racial wealth gap. But if used thoughtfully, it can dismantle many of the barriers that we've seen for centuries. And so it was like all these different factors coming together. I read this article. I almost wanted to jump up and down in the airport because it resonated so well. And I felt like I was being heard, although I wasn't saying anything, but I just felt like I was being heard by a report and definitely can share it with you all if you'd like. But this is the reason that we started the generative AI survey. And I want to show a video. It is 3+ minutes, so give it a chance, but it really does show some of the biases. This is Joy, and I'm going to butcher her last name, so I'm not going to try, but she's an author and poet, and she did a TEDx and spoke to a group at Harvard. And I saw her in person a couple of times. One time she showed this video at an event with Hillary Clinton, and it just really resonated with me. The video is from 2018. So this is before ChatGPT. This is before everyone started going crazy after generative AI. And it just goes to show like how prevalent it's been for so many years and how we could have addressed it before a lot of the tools came out, but that we didn't. So here we go.
My heart smiles as I bask in their legacies, knowing their lives have altered many destinies. In her eyes, I see my mother's poise. In her face, I glimpse my auntie's grace. In this case of deja vu, a 19th century question comes into view. In a time when Sojourner Truth asks, ain't I a woman? Today, we pose this question to new powers, making bets on artificial intelligence, hope towers. The Amazonians peek through windows blocking deep blues as faces increment scars. Old burns, new urns, collecting data chronicling our past, often forgetting to deal with gender, race, and class. Again, I ask, ain't I a woman? Face by face, the answers seem uncertain. Young and old, proud icons are dismissed. Can machines ever see my queens as I view them? Can machines ever see our grandmothers as we knew them? Ida B. Wells, data science pioneer, hanging facts, stacking stats on the lynching of humanity, teaching truths hidden in data, each entry and omission, a person worthy of respect. Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, the first Black Congresswoman, but not the first to be misunderstood by machines well-versed in data-driven mistakes. Michelle Obama, unabashed and unafraid to wear her crown of history, yet her crown seems a mystery to systems unsure of her hair. A wig, a bouffant, a toupee, maybe not. Are there no words for our braids and our locks? Does relaxed hair and sunny skin make Oprah the first lady? Even for her face, well known, some algorithms fault her, echoing sentiments that strong women are men. We laugh, celebrating the successes of our sisters with serena smiles. No label is worthy of our beauty.
Okay. Any thoughts on that video?
It's so astoundingly crazy and offensive and shocking, and also amazing to see that she did this 6 years ago. And I mean, I'm like, have you tried running some of these in like, you know, like ChatGPT and the like, and like, you know, with our current model, like have things gotten any better? Have things gotten any worse? That's what I'm really wondering.
Yeah, I haven't tried that, but even, trying just putting in names and it not knowing how or who to generate. And, but even with Google Gemini's recent launch, having the founder fathers be Black men or having an Asian woman be a pope, like that's over indexing. And it's like, we don't want to change history, but we just want it to be correct and identify the people right. So it's, I don't know. I don't know if it's gotten better. Hopefully it has, but um, who knows? I should definitely try it. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
This all stems from the same like underlying problem with things like digital photography, right? It's just a lack of data, lack of representation in the training data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly it. Yeah, I mean, the people inputting the data, where the data, the large language models are being taken from are all, I mean, unfortunately, it's the same group of people putting it in, and largely white men are the ones inputting the data. And you're going to think we all have biases, and whether they're conscious or not. And so we're going to put in what we're familiar with. Like I might over-index on women or Black women when if I were building the models.
I mean, one thing I also wonder if you've seen anything like it, like have there been have there been any models that are trained, say, overwhelmingly on Black women and using that? Like I'm curious if like if models like that still wind up with the same biases, or if that kind of like uh representation and maybe even over correction on training the model can help, or like do like because just like does it get us to a better place? Because if it does, then there's at least some hope that we could figure out how to fix some of this stuff. And if not, like, are we just screwed no matter what? Yeah.
Yeah, I've found one like a chat GPT that is for specifically for Black people, but I don't know that that helps. I haven't found any for like images or, that are for diverse groups and just everyone, like it shouldn't be just for one group
I
of
mean,
people.
do
Yeah.
do we know, like I feel like the places where we might see the best contrast are places like China and India, which obviously have the largest populations and the largest non-white populations, and so are like do our models there not even necessarily better, but just different in how they handle things? That's also something I'd wonder about.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling, and this isn't scientific, but that they're not. Because if we get one group of people creating a model, they're likely going to resemble themselves. And I think one of the key solutions is having a diverse group of people around a table to analyze and review the tools before they're released. So different parts of the world, different ages, different classes, just different races, different sexes around the table to review it. Because otherwise, I mean, we're not going to be, and we're never going to eliminate all biases, but we're never going to be able to address them. And right now, every tool is just like, we got to go out fast. Like we have to be the first ones. And it's not really a thought. Even today, I read an article where they're talking about safeguarding against privacy and things like that. But why can't we have the same when it comes to biases in this tech? So just we're going to start moving to the data that we did find in the survey,
Please.
but yeah, go ahead.
No, please, love to see it.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we uncovered biases in generative AI and highlighted public concern, guiding particularly tech companies to what they can do to find equitable solutions. They do believe that companies would be most effective through communications to mitigate biases in generative AI. So that's like being transparent about, okay, we got this wrong. I mean, Google Gemini keeps getting it wrong. It keeps being in the news. It was in Politico today, and they're not, even with an update to a model, with the findings that they're putting in Google searches, it's not that easy. And so companies just need to be transparent about what they're going to do to address biases, because it's not going away. And this generation, upcoming generations in Alpha, Gen Z, they're not going to let companies just get away with this kind of, we're going to keep trying, but we're not going to really address it. So here, starting with some key findings, we did do a balanced, gender and age group targeting. We had some screening questions like, have you even heard of generative AI? Do you believe there are biases in generative AI, just to get a smaller targeted group? So that was kind of our criteria. And we did focus on the US because we can't afford we can afford to go worldwide, but we do hope that in the future we can expand it. We do hope to do the report every 6 months or to a year, since things are changing so fast. So the survey found that 77.2% of respondents were familiar with generative AI, and many expressed concerns around racism, sexism, and classism. And I'm going to get into this more, but classism really is like you have to be privileged to be able to even access generative AI. So a lot of people don't have access to internet, don't have STEM programs, just, aren't able to access this. So it is kind of a privilege and a classism, and kind of exasperates a certain group to having the privilege of using generative AI. So there was a strong correlation between awareness of generative AI and concerns about racism and sexism, accessibility in particular. It's evident that individuals who are informed about generative AI are also those who express concerns about these biases. And this underscores the importance of education and awareness, recognizing and addressing biases in AI. So it's just important that we address these, all the isms that there are, and educate people on how to address them, making tech companies aware of the concerns that people have who understand generative AI, and pressuring them in a way or advocating for them to address these different concerns. And please interrupt me if you have questions as we go. So going into more detail on the racism, sexism, classism part. So racism concerns were noted equally across all genders. We'll get into age groups next. There's a cross-generational anxiety about the role that generative AI can play in perpetuating these racial biases. When it comes to sexism, 18 to 29-year-olds were the most concerned about sexism and generative AI. And then classism concerns voice fears that generative AI is exacerbating the socioeconomic disparities, highlighting the risk that AI technology disproportionately benefits already advantaged individuals. So this just goes to what I mentioned earlier about, a lot of groups being privileged. I'm part of it, because I can use it. But there are a lot of people who just don't have access, just like they don't have access to clean water in the US, they don't have access to generative AI or able to clearly understand it. So when it comes to age groups, younger people express significant concerns, so that 18 to 29-year-old group, around discrimination and privacy, while older groups were worried about accessibility and inclusivity. And then we go into a little bit more detail on ages. So this young age group, 18 to 29, about 60% express concerns with biases in generative AI. Of course, they're more engaged with digital content and more aware of the potential. Again, this goes back to Alpha generation, Gen Z being more aware, being all into digital content, and really caring about the biases in everything, not just generative AI, but in general. And then we kind of grouped, we found between 30 and 60-year-olds, they're pretty much on the same level, slightly lower, 45% for 30 to 44, and 50% for 45 to 60 being concerned about generative AI, which is really interesting, I think, because the older respondents were rates similar to the youngest demographic. And their reasoning for being concerned about generative AI could be because they're nervous about it. Like, you know, it's completely different for that group, that generation. So I think it's different for younger respondents, why they were, you know, younger respondents are concerned about the biases and different things like that. I think the older demographic is worried about, you know, fairness, equality, discrimination issues, just from a different perspective. And I do want to mention quickly that I did work on this survey with a professor from the University of New Hampshire. So I didn't just come with it myself. He helped with the questions. He helped me with analyzing it. There's a LinkedIn Live out there if you like to listen to it. But yeah, didn't do it myself. So the exploration of diverse perspectives on generative AI biases unfolds into broader discussions on the implications of these biases. Public sentiment evaluation reveals nuanced views on the commitment of technology companies to DEI and AI development. So just means that the public thinks tech companies have a responsibility and a role to address these biases in generative AI. So we asked like questions on, do you agree or disagree with these statements? So one, generative AI does not include biases toward people. Obviously, the green is neutral, but most people did think that there were biases in generative AI. So that's the 16%, the 17.5%. Those are the strongly disagree and disagree with this statement. And then a little bit less for people who thought there are not biases in generative AI. It's still pretty large of a group. I think this 44.8%, and you'll see in the next one, is the majority of neutral as well. I think they just aren't aware. They don't really know if they are. I mean, again, it's not really talked about much. And so unless you are asking questions or, you know, images that could be construed, you probably don't witness it every day. So it's something that people would have to become aware of, I think, to be able to say, I want this addressed. Then we also asked technology companies have diversity, equity, inclusion in mind when creating generative AI tools. And it's pretty even for they agree with it and they don't agree with it, with half being neutral on it. But it's interesting. I don't really know who would address the biases if it weren't tech companies, but very open to ideas on who else would be able to address those biases and really make a difference with it. Also, we asked, when asked if they would be more inclined to use generative AI if they knew biases were taken into account when tech companies create the tool, overwhelmingly, they said yes, they would be more likely to use it. And I don't think that it's going to stop them from using it, but I think that they would be more inclined to use it. When asked about the dangers of using generative AI, respondents were pretty even. So I'm not sure if you can see this, but the first one is reinforcement of stereotypes is a danger people are concerned with. The most they're concerned with is discriminatory content generation. And next was application of existing biases. There's underrepresentation and marginalization, and then legal and ethical liability. I mean, it's really grouped into reinforcing the stereotypes, and kind of the first four are all kind of about biases toward underrepresented, marginalized people and perpetuating those stereotypes that we've already had for a long time. It is interesting that legal and ethical liability is included, because I do feel like those two topics are something that have been spoken about more so in the news and reports and from tech companies. So people are a little bit more aware of that. There's a lot of privacy talk, a lot of, you know, legal situations that companies have to worry about when using generative AI. And when asked what tech companies could do to garner trust that generative AI tools are free of biases, respondents provided a variety of answers, but the most transparency. And I've mentioned that a few times, but um, I know it's hard for companies to be transparent about what they're doing. They definitely don't want their stakeholders or board to think that they're not doing the right thing. But at some point, they're going to be forced to address these. And it can't be just a check the box type of situation. George Floyd's murder was the anniversary was about 4 days ago. And a lot of companies, said we're donating, $1 million to the Black community. And the Washington Post came out with an article last year that said nobody knows where that money went. It didn't go to the Black community. It's just, we didn't, as the general public, hold those companies accountable. And so that's one of the things that is our responsibility, is to make sure that tech companies are actually doing what they say. Some of the others, ethical guidelines, standards, another popular one, bias audits, which would definitely be a good idea. Just like we have tech companies going to the White House to set guidelines around privacy, we should have the same guidelines, a minimum of you have to do this to address biases. So at least we know tech companies are starting at a certain minimum of addressing those biases when creating technology. And again, holding them accountable, just like I mentioned, the education and awareness they can provide the general public and consumers as well. Ensuring diverse data sets. I mean, how often in clinical trials and with other health companies have we not had diverse data sets? We actually just work with GSK to release a press release about how they're going to use more diverse data sets when they're doing clinical trials. And I don't know if anyone's heard of United Healthcare's recent lawsuit from a family in Michigan, but for a decade, they've been using AI to decide if people get insurance or not. And people have died from the lack of insurance that they've been provided, although doctors have said, this patient needs X, Y, and Z. And so whether it's generative AI or just AI technology in general, we've got to make sure that we're being ethical, fair, trying to be unbiased in what we're doing, just because it's almost like a life and death situation, not to be dramatic, but in some ways it could be. And then we not only wanted to identify the problems in generative AI, and trust me, I use the software all the time. I know that my agency has to embrace it to move ahead. I'm not afraid of it, but we also wanted to discuss the solution. So implementing internal feedback mechanisms at companies to ensure technology is built with a commitment of impartiality. So I mentioned having the right people around the table, but there's also the opportunity to have, an engineer who's also versed in DEI to be in the room where other engineers are developing the technology, to say, oh, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And that is a commitment and, a financial situation that companies would have to do, but it's a lot better than being in the situation some of the tech companies are in right now. Encouraging consumers to demand technology companies address bias through company feedback and products and services that are unbiased. I've mentioned that one as well. Press for an evaluation and certification framework that requires companies to assess and certify their generative AI technologies for bias. And this can be done for large companies, small companies, but besides those guidelines that maybe larger companies have, just, having a certification, kind of like a B Corp or, anything like that, where you can just say, we went through this process of trying to make sure that we're developing technology that's free of bias. And again, as I mentioned, we're never going to be free of all biases, but we can try our best to address them. And then initiate targeted communications campaigns designed to showcase the company's dedicated efforts toward eliminating bias in generative AI. This hits on the transparency mark that a lot of consumers thought was a solution for companies, and would also educate people who maybe aren't aware of biases and being able to identify them. It's the same with mis and disinformation. A lot of people can't really identify when there is, that information coming up in generative AI tools. The same with biases that people can perpetuate and not even be aware of them. So that's, and one more slide. Companies must implement rigorous testing and validation processes to ensure generative AI tools accurately reflect historical context. And, excuse me, this goes back to Google's Gemini. And we just have to have diverse perspectives. We can't over index for certain ones. And I think when it comes to Gemini, they were doing that because 10, 15 years ago when Google Photos came out, if you put show me a picture of a Black person, a monkey would show up. And so they were like, that's never happening again. And so they were like, we're going to put all the diverse people in here. And they did that without considering, oh, not everybody is a woman, or everybody is Asian or Black. So there's a middle ground that we have to hit where everybody's included in these data sets. And so just really want to know from everyone, are there other ways we can advocate for tech that's free of biases? Do you agree, disagree with the survey or the report? And just general thoughts on what we found out.
Well, Catherine, one thing I'll ask to start things rolling, and then I'd love to hear thoughts from the community, comments about your research, and thoughts on your big question right there. But we are here with AI Marketers Guild, so what can a community like ours do? Like, we're not programming the models here, but we've got a lot of people who are influencing models, influencing brands, influencing agencies, running amazing tech startups, other researchers and analysts here. We've got great diverse group, especially in terms of the skill set that's in here and those kinds of backgrounds. Like what do you think we should be doing?
Yeah, I think one is the communications part, the education of the groups that you're in. So making them aware of the chance for biases in tech, taking these results or any other studies that you might find, and just bringing more awareness to it, saying, I know there could be biases in this, and so I'm going to make them aware of it. So it's really just educating. Also in the Slack channel for the Guild, someone said that they put in, maybe it was ChatGPT, like 4.0, show me a picture of the war, and sorry if this is sensitive, but show me a picture of the war in Israel and Palestine. And it showed an Israeli flag and them winning. And then he said, well, can you show me a flag of Palestine winning? And ChatGPT said, no, I can't do that. I can't, create an image like that. And just responding to those, saying, I think maybe some people responded to it, but, what can we do action-wise to, eliminate that? We should have neutral outcomes when we put things in ChatGPT and it not just, be one-sided. So I think those are other ways.
I mean, do you think there's any issue of responsibility? Because when we get into revisionist history, historical fiction, let's take a look at something in the past, right? And let's images of the South winning the Civil War. Obviously sensitive for many folks. It probably implies slavery is around a lot longer, and all kinds of ramifications from there. But then there are novels written about this. There are all kinds of dystopian literature, historical fiction. What is it? The Man in the High Castle. What was the Amazon series? And if the U.S. lost to Japan and Germany in World War II, and anyway, is there any responsibility there, or do you even think that's an issue?
Sorry, what was the beginning of
I,
the
I
question?
mean, it's more like when it comes to historical revisionism, right? Like, you know,
Oh, no, that's definitely an issue. Like, I've actually spoken to a woman who is going into schools and companies to emphasize like what history is, and that, you know, generative AI tools don't always get it right. So you really need to understand what history was so that we don't believe everything that it puts out. Because a lot of people do, although it says at the bottom, you know, you can't believe everything this is saying. But like I mentioned, with the founding fathers being Black, they were definitely not Black, but some people might believe what was coming out of Google Gemini. So we just have to be knowledgeable about history, and that's another factor that companies need to take into consideration when building these tools.
well, and some of it sounds like
Well,
how it's.
well,
Oh, sorry. I'll just close on this and then segue over there. But like also how not to prevent like the next Lin-Manuel Miranda, like storyboarding the next Hamilton. Because like that's a wonderful use that isn't revisionism, it's reinterpretation. But everyone knows that this is art. Yeah. No one's watching Hamilton and saying, "Oh wow, I didn't know Jefferson had hair like that." Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's like if it's on purpose and if a person is generating it and people are aware of what the representation is. But if I'm just generating something and I don't know, nobody's educating me about it, and I think it's factual, then that could be a problem.
yeah. All I was going to say is generative AI is extraordinarily derivative, and so it can't create stuff that it generally can't create things that don't exist in the real world. So, for instance, the South winning the Civil War, there's been books and imagery that have like told that false story. And maybe the reason it can't generate images of the Palestinians winning the war because there hasn't been any imagery or books written on that topic. I mean, I'll give you a simple thing to try to do. Ask generative AI to create a wooden wagon wheel that only has 3 spokes, and those spokes are spaced equally apart. It can't do it because there are no wooden wagon wheels in the world that only have 3 spokes. So generative AI it doesn't have like that initial spark of creating something new out of the void. It is strictly just mashing up or kit bashing, photo bashing stuff that already exists.
Yeah, and
And,
I'm not a
and that
technician, so I don't know how it would happen, but that's something we need to find a solution for. I don't even know what that would be, but that's a great point.
well, better models.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm off camera. In addition to my work as a marketer, I'm also writing a work of historical fiction, and I've done a lot of research. And what I've discovered is that the book I'm working on takes place in colonial Canada. What I'm discovering is that it's very hard to find sources that describe truly how diverse that population was, but they do exist. And I think your point about the engineers who are designing the model, needing extra effort is required in order to incorporate sources that tell a fuller picture. I can tell you just as a researcher that it takes an enormous amount of effort to find those sources. And in some cases they don't exist. So I really think that in the absence of that effort, at the very least that tech companies can do is is to suggest that people include that in their prompt. Ask for an unbiased version of this answer as a follow-up. That some of that can be incorporated structurally. Because people are not going to do this without education. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's a great solution is, companies suggesting to do these prompts to try to eliminate biases from the answers. That's wonderful. Yeah.
One question I have is, because we do say companies need to eliminate biases, but then we see Facebook and their security committee, I think it's all white men. So, and this is just recently named. But what about the data? Can you really have an unbiased response if the data just doesn't exist, either because it's being erased, as we see in many states happening right now, that's an effort, or because it's just being assumed that a certain demographic is the kind of like the global response for everything?
Yeah, you're right. We're never going to get rid of all biases. I do think Lisa's idea of prompts that, try to eliminate the biases would be a good solution to that. And, South Dakota today eliminated DEI from its education materials. And so you're right, it's happening daily that we're losing the history that we need to have accurate data come from generative AI. So I do think prompts will be better. I don't know if this is true, but I mean, we can get that research and input it into large language models, correct? I mean, it's not just taking it from the internet.
They are taking it from the internet many times, but I guess there has to be an understanding that gap is there. I'm assuming so. At the end of the day, you need diverse people that can realize, hey, but this is my experience and it's different than yours. But tech companies do not seem very willing to do that.
No, yeah, they do not have a diverse group around the table. I mean, it's just like what we've seen throughout history. I mean, you look at leadership and you see certain groups, and it's just like that with generative AI, unfortunately.
Sorry, see, someone is raising their hand.
Yeah, Jay-Z.
Hey, David, thanks for hosting this. And hey, Catherine, thanks for the data.
Of course.
So my question is around getting more representative data. When I was recruiting speakers for Capital One, it was really difficult to find female speakers who had recordings, for example. Like that data set almost didn't exist. So in terms of sourcing more diverse data, do you have to pay for it? Like, where is the incentive for people to contribute a more diverse data set?
Yeah, I would say so. We work with Amazon on inclusive tech. So they're trying to what they call build born inclusive technology. So before it's created, making sure that it's inclusive. And there are a lot of engineers, Black women specifically, who try to elevate the problem within the company. And so I think it's not only finding people at Amazon who can lead those efforts, but them recruiting people who voluntarily just want to make the models more inclusive as well. You're right, they'll probably have to be incentivized in some way to, take time out of a lot of time. But it's kind of like having your own board of directors who are focused on those biases and reviewing the technology and kind of the same benefits that a board would have. This board for biases would be the same. And if the person is actually in the room as the technology is being developed, they would be just like another employee who would be paid the same as the engineers would be paid.
I see, so it's taking a portion of their work time, their full time.
Yeah, it's a separate person. It's like your whole role would be identifying and addressing those biases.
Yeah, because a lot of the women I spoke to, they were like, well, I have to do this on top of my full-time job, and all these DEI initiatives fall on my plate, but then I still have to perform, to a consistent standard. So I think it's important to incentivize people so that they feel valued for this additional data set, for all the columns, or for all the data points. It takes time.
It's like affinity groups, a lot of the DEI work that they do are coming from internal groups that aren't paid to do it. And that's across all companies, unfortunately. And at some point, they're going to start demanding that they get paid. Because I know at Amazon, they do a lot of work. And without these affinity groups, there'd probably be no DEI. And I know Amazon probably kind of hate me for saying that, but it's so true that the teams do so much work, and it's on top of what they're already asked to do at these companies.
Yep. Thank
I-
you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And my mind was going as you were both speaking that maybe there's some incentive that can be created in terms of crowdsourced reputational ratings for different AI engines, that where they're graded in terms of their bias or lack of bias by people who use them. And those ratings can be publicized. If you want a really unbiased tool, use this one and not that one. And the publicity is a huge part of this. I mentioned that because your company does PR. Like, these things can be influential if there's buzz around them. But I think unless there are negative repercussions for not doing this work, companies won't do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Unless we hold them accountable and do something about it, just like, this is completely different, but a protest with healthcare and the maternal rights that are going on, they're being kind of forced to talk about it. Some companies are. And so you're right, unless we get out there and force them, why would you? Why would you do that? And work extra and pay more, especially as DEI roles become a thing of the past. I think they will continue. They'll just be called something else. But now it's just kind of like, we don't need to do that. We just need AI people to hire now. But that's a great idea with the class thing. Yeah.
I like that idea. It's like a Trust Pilot logo, or I think it's really important because I think women who code just went bankrupt due to the lack of like corporate sponsorships. But if the model wasn't based on donation, but more based on a verification, I think that's really interesting and great and simple, like easy to implement. Thank you.
If you want to work with me on it,
Yeah.
Where's the process, or is anybody doing the process of like giving tax credits? Because ultimately, like these companies all companies are run per like profitability, right? And making money. And if they can make more money by doing the right thing, that gives them a lot more incentive. So just out of curiosity, does anybody know if there's a group that's lobbying in the federal government about this? Okay.
I haven't
Not
seen
to my
any.
knowledge.
I have not, no.
They need tax credits. That will make them all
They will
immediately
love that.
update things.
Yes, they will love that. I know there are a lot of studies about, the bottom line if you embrace DEI and things like that, but I don't know if it's made it to the government to care about so much.
Yeah, I have a hard time imagining that would ever happen, honestly.
Let's make it happen. Let's riot.
Catherine, can you share the link to that YouTube video you showed?
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Catherine? Comments of what we've seen today? And I will set some in the chat, but I'll give an added endorsement for what Juan shared there with Invisible Women. It's like once you read that book, it's like you can't unread it, and you just see examples of that everywhere, or it just becomes so much clearer in my case when talking to women. I'm like, oh yeah, no, so that's what that book was about.
Yeah, it's amazing how you don't recognize it until it's like brought to light. Like one of the other lines of business we're doing at Amazon is embracing Black media, and they would host all these events, and nobody in the company thought about inviting diverse groups of media. It's just, I'm like, what do you mean? You have all these brilliant people together, and they don't even think about it. So someone started that outreach. So it's pretty amazing that you don't think about things until it's brought to light.
Is there any work being done with educational institutions? Because I can see this should be like sex education, right? And I know both are going to be controversial, but teach people like algorithm literacy or how to discern what they're seeing, like critical thinking. But yeah, I'm just saying, I'm like, it's not going to happen. But maybe in California or New York.
Yeah, I know it's being thought about just because I worked with that professor, and they're, I think, really trying to come up with certifications that companies can do, but I don't know how much backing they have or how much funding they're getting from the institution as well. So I think it's kind of an afterthought, and the professors kind of have to take it on their own behalf to work on it.
That's any other questions or comments for Catherine? Well, this is eye-opening. I won't say too surprising, at least in that I just from seeing bits and pieces out there and just how much improvement I know needs to be done. But this really has really just grounds it, and the data is really eye-opening. I'm looking forward to way more to understand more of the trends out there. Love to have you back sometime, and also anytime you want to stop by and just have either be a fly on the wall and participate. Again, just like having more perspectives here from all kinds of backgrounds, personal and professional. It matters. So like that's the best request I have. There is even a private Women in AI channel that there are a couple moderators of them. Perhaps we can have a few more just to make it a little bit easier for folks to join who want to, but just DM me if you want to be involved with that. And there are things like that whereas AMG can do better and do more to shed more light on these issues. We try to be mindful even about just the about the kinds of speakers we have in here and representation on that level. But there's just obviously a lot more to be done, and so ways that marketers could be part of the solution. Love to get those ideas going. We have some related channels, like we've got a great ethics in AI channel, and thanks to some of our great speakers who also run the AI and marketing newsletter. So there's some like steps we've taken in these directions, but obviously I know there's way more we can do to contribute there, and similarly as there are others who just diverse voices of all kinds who should be part of this community. Like let's get them in there and just make more room for that. So Catherine, thank you, and thanks everyone for your thoughtful comments. And we've got another guest speaker coming next week, and the same day that we have the AMG Tech Week Showcase in New York at First Wednesday. So I'm already preparing to be exhausted. Don't get on a Zoom with me that Thursday. I might need my camera off, but I hope to see some of you in person if you're in New York next week. We'll still do the virtual call and way more coming up. If you haven't lately, also check that the Luma calendar. Oh, Deborah Williamson's actually a speaker on June 12th. She's here today. So longtime e-marketer, business insider intelligence analyst. So yeah, lots of terrific folks coming up and more discussions to be had. So thank you all.